Well, hello there, and thank you for joining me and Fearful Freddy. Glad to have you with us. Basic Bible. We are working through a lot of stuff, including the books of the Bible and remembering Romans. Me and Mr. Fearful Freddy over here are going to guide you through an expansion of knowledge with regards to the books of the Bible and remembering Romans. So let's just knock. Who's there? Butter. Butter who? Butter let me in. I'm freezing out here. It does look a little bit cold out here, but I'm not sure it's going to be any warmer around there because that's just a door sitting in the middle of a road. I love that picture. Yes, I do. Here we go. Woo, woo, woo. Segment number 1, we're going to do the doodle. Here we go. Now remember, oh dear, Fearful Freddy, you're in the way again. Well, can you guys see all those? I'd like for Fearful Freddy to stay around for more than 30 seconds. Yeah, there they are. Those are all the books of the Bible of history. Now, you're going to see in this particular class, we're going to begin plugging in books, other books of the Old Testament. We're going to plug them into this historical timeline. So if you are started Genesis and move this way, you largely have these books of the Bible in order, historical order. And so events are happening largely just like that, but right across that historical timeline till you get to Esther. But obviously there's more books than just Genesis through Esther. And so here in a second, I'm going to show you how you plug some of those books in over there. But you got to be able to say those books. And so, can you do it? Oh dear. All right, then remember we divided it into these various sections, okay? In our first major section, I set that off in red because the rest of this actually falls into the second section, okay? So Genesis, okay, that's the origins. We've already done that, all right? Now I got it. Sorry, Fearful, you got to go. All right, and now we're into the rest of the books of history. We're going to deal with these 4 segments, going there, being there, losing there, returning there, but it all has to do with the promised land, which of course is this area that you're going to see right here. But when you get to the first section of the promised land history, what's going to happen here is you're going to have them exiting, right? So they're exiting Egypt, all right? Then they're going to go from Egypt, Exodus, Leviticus, they're going to go down here to Mount Sinai, going to spend some time there. Then they're going to leave Mount Sinai, wander around, and eventually they're going to be cursed to wander in the wilderness for 40 years because they didn't have any faith. And then in Deuteronomy, we're going to come up here and we're finally going to come to the point, the precipice of entering into the promised land. My family and I, before going to bed each night, we're reading through the book of Deuteronomy. Interesting book. So there you go. All right, so that's this part, the going there. All right. Then we talked about the being there. It all happens right here in that little blue circle right there, all right? Because that's basically the promised land. So the being there, that's going to cover Joshua, Judges, and Ruth. The being there. Then today, we're going to look at the losing there. So they went there, but now they're going to be in the process of losing their claim on this area. And the thing that's interesting is that they begin to lose the promised land almost at the exact moment that they desire a king. Now you remember that Saul is going to be their first king. And you remember what they said? Give us a king so that we can be like all the nations around about us. First step towards losing your identity. God didn't want them to be like everybody else around them. God wanted them to be his chosen special people, but they wanted to be like everybody else. And so I'm going to suggest to you that when they begin to appoint the kings, they begin the process of losing. Now, it's going to be years before they actually lose the promised land, but they begin the process of losing. 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st, 2nd Kings, 1st, 2nd Chronicles, they all deal with the time period within Israel's history of the kings. All right. So here you see them up here. All right. There's this section. Now, this is where we're going to make things even more complicated for you. Okay. What I want you to notice is over here, I've got some writings that come after Esther. Do you know the books of the Bible? 1st Chronicles, 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms. Okay. So the next book is Job. All right. These books, I'm going to call them personal writings. These books largely get written during the time of the kings. There's one exception. and that's the book of Job. Job probably is written about a time period way back here. Okay? But all of the others, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, you've read all of those. Those books are written right in here. And you know why that is, right? Because those books are largely written by two kings. Who are they? David and Solomon. And so they're going to be written during this time period right here. So you see what we're doing is we're expanding the books of the Bible now to include, and I'm going to have two different sections. The first section is personal writings. Where do they go in this historical timeline? Well, they fit right there, except for the book of Job. Can you do that? I know that might be just a little bit complicated, but I really think that you can do this. There's my buddy Dennis. Good to hear from you, Dennis, too, all the way over there in Kenya. Appreciate you for tuning in. So I think you guys can do this. I don't think. I know you can, but I don't want to be too complicated with it, all right? Remember, here's your historical books. Now we're beginning to plug in the rest of the Old Testament. Where did they get written on this historical timeline? Well, these books get written right here, except for the book of Job. Now, next time, we'll expand that, and I'll take you to the rest of the books of the Old Testament, the prophetic books, and I'll show you where they get written. So stick with me. All right, so if I'm going to test you over the first segment, what I would ask is this. What group of books comes after the being there section? So we've got the going there, the being there, losing there. Very good. All right, that'll be on your test. What four books of personal writings were written during the period of history? Job? No, Job what? Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon. Very good. All right, but remember, Job is written else about a time other than that. All right. All right, there you go. Well, here's my little chickadee chick. Why did the pillow cross the road? Pillow. I got to be honest with you. I slept deep last night. It was kind of a tough night, and anyhow, I slept deep, and my pillow and I were pretty close last night. And I would wonder why my pillow would want to cross the road, leave me behind to cross the road. So let's just answer the question, why did the pillow cross the road? Clearly it was because it was collecting chicken feathers. Remember, the chickens are crossing the road, so where's the pillow going to go to get its feathers? Across the road. Did you see the... Here, I don't know if I can do it again. Yeah, I think I can. Watch it, guys. Look at here. Oh, sometimes I just make myself smile. All right, segment number 2. I'm lacking my motion again. I don't like that. See how it just kind of rushed to it? Come on. There we go. There we go. Look at here. Whoop. All right, there we go. We are making a memory, and as we're, this is making a memory. We're going to doodle the book of Romans, and we're way into the book of Romans. And get your doodlators out, because we're fixing to doodlate one. All right, 1, creation points to a creator. Circumcision of the heart, sin is attracts. Faith, Abraham, right? 2 Adams, death, burial, and resurrection, baptism. The doo-doo chapter. Holy Spirit chapter. I choose the Jew. The Jew says, we don't really care. And now we get to the Gentiles are going to be grafted in. Because the Jews, well, not just because, but as certainly part of one of the reasons, that with regards to the Jews rejecting God, God then is going to graft in the Gentile world. Now remember, at this particular time, I guess even today, you got 2 classifications of people. You got the Jew and you got the Gentile. Everybody's a Gentile is somebody who isn't a Jew. If you're a Jew, you're a Jew. But if you're a Gentile, you're not a Jew. Okay, so you got those 2 classifications of people. You got the Jew and you got the Gentile. Well, remember, what God has done is he has really focused in on the Jew. But the Jew rejects God. And so God says, what I'm going to do is I'm going to graft into the root. I'm going to graft in the Gentiles. Now, that doesn't mean he rejects all of Israel, because not all of Israel rejected God. But many, I would think I could even say most, rejected God. So now he's going to graft in the Gentile world. Now, that's where you need to get your doodlators. I think we can do this, but I'm not sure we can. I like Romans chapter 11. You notice you can see the tree there. Gabriel did a really good job with that. So, but I'm not sure that I can duplicate it. So let's just see. Okay, so you got the trunk of the tree, and then give it some root systems. Okay. All right, there you go. And you got the trunk of the tree. Now, the tree is going to have a limb, and this limb is going to come out here and then shoot back up kind of parallel to the tree. And the reason that's important is because that parallel is the 11. Okay, you see, you got your 1 here and you got your 1 here, right? So that's the 11. And then you kind of put some bandages here, okay, and I'll tell you why in a minute. And then you put the top of your tree over here, okay? Can you guys see that? All right, so you got your 1 and you got your 1. Guess I should come all the way down here. Can you guys see that? Not a very good tree. It's better in Gabriel's rendition. But the reason we needed to put that together is this. Chapter 11, here's a 1 and here's a 1. So they got the 2 1s side by side. Chapter 11 is where the Gentiles are grafted in. Now, I need to explain to you what grafting is in order for you to appreciate that picture. Grafting is when you take the limb or branch of another tree and you cut it off, and then you make a hole in a tree and you stick that branch or that limb into that hole, and eventually, if you do it right, that new branch will adhere itself to that tree, and it will become part of that tree, and it will begin to take from the nutrients and the sap and all the things that are in the tree, and it will begin to grow. Now, I've tried this. My father's tried this more than I have. We have never been very successful. I don't know that we ever were successful. But people who know what they're doing can take a limb off of a tree, another tree out there, and they can bring it over here to this tree, and they can graft it in. And so that limb then becomes part of this tree. This is an illustration of how God is taking his chosen people, the Jew, many of who are rejecting him, and he is saying to the rest of the world, okay, I am going to now take you, and those of you who accept me, I will graft you in. I will make you a part of the tree that I favor, that I love. So Gentiles are grafted in. That is chapter 11. All right, if we're going to make a memory, excuse me. Here's the what do you call that thing? Memory verse. Take each of the, now this one's going to be a little harder on you because you notice I got 2 verses and it's just really the first part of verse 18, but it's a little bit wordy. I get that, all right? But I've let you off the hook on a lot of them. So here you go. This is your memory verse. Again, moms and dads, use whatever translation you want, but this is your memory verse. Take each of the lines, say it 5 times. After you've done that, then blank out key words. Write that on sticky notes. Put them all over the house. Every time you pass it, say those key words. And by the end of the time you're doing these studies, you ought to have that one in your little brain right up here. You know what I'm saying? All right. Boy, I don't like that. Why is it not? There's my action. See the 2 expanding? I just don't understand what's wrong with my computer. I may have to get a new one. What is the theme of Romans chapter 11? Gentiles are grafted in. Very good. Can you quote the memory verse? No, because we haven't had enough time to work on it. That was a kind of wordy memory verse. But you will be able to, won't you? Moment of silly. There's my horse, like that horse. Here we go. Ecclesiastes 3 and 4 says there is a time to laugh, and so why not do it right now? Why should you never tell jokes to an egg? Now, this becomes very important to old Sonny Childs because Sonny Childs has chickens, and chickens lay eggs, and I eat those eggs, and this is a very important part of this particular joke. Why should you never tell jokes to an egg? Because it might crack up. And I don't want the egg to crack up until I get it to the skillet. You know what I'm saying? So you don't want... So I don't go down to the chicken coop and tell them that I do not tell jokes at the chicken coop. I don't want them to crack up. Oh, dear. Oh, that bothers me. There it is. There I am. Oh, yeah. Ponder a passage. All right, we will ponder a passage. And here is the passage that we will ponder. It's Romans chapter 11. But if some of the branches were broken off. Now, remember, we're talking about grafting. Some of the branches are broken off because they weren't faithful. They didn't. Remember what happens in chapter 10? Chapter 9, God says, I choose the Jew. Chapter 10, most of them say, I don't care. So God breaks off those branches. They're not faithful. And what's he going to do? Well, he's going to graft in some others. And you, although a wild olive shoot, were grafted in. Remember what I said. So God goes to a different tree, the wild olive. He takes a branch, the faithful, off of there, and he grafts them in. And now they become part of the original tree. And they're going to be sharing in the nutrients of that tree, grafted in among the others, and now share in the nourishing root of the olive tree. So again, they're sharing in the main body of the tree because God claimed them and brought them in. Hi, Miss Debbie. Now he's going to make an admonition to them. Since you have been added to the tree, do not be arrogant toward the branches. Don't get being arrogant because, hey, I got chosen and I am now being, and I'm better than you, because you ain't. If you are, remember, it is not you who support the root, but the root that supports you. And so don't get arrogant because you are blessed to be included, and most everybody watching this are going to be Gentiles. And so we were blessed to be included in the main body, the root, added to the Jew. And in that, then, we are going to be supported by the main body. All the history of the Jew is going to come now to you and I and give us the nutrients to live on. Then you will say, branches were broken off so I might be grafted in. That is true. They were broken off because of their unbelief. I told you that, right? God, those who weren't faithful, he had to break them off. But you stand fast through faith. So do not become proud, but fearful or fear. We need to be people who appreciate the fact that God has added us in. Hi, Mom. Thanks for watching. All right. Testing over segment number 3. Here are your 5 questions, and you might notice that each one of them has a reference. This is an open book test. So all you got to do is you got to go to those references and know the answers by reading them right off the book. All right, here, let me step aside again. There you go. Get a screenshot of that, because that's going to be on your test. All right, moving right along. Let's have a moment of brevitation. What did one light bulb say to the other light bulb? Have you ever considered that? What do the light bulbs say to each other as they're sitting alone in the darkness of the cabinet? Or perhaps they're part of your lamps. I got a lamp that hangs over top of my dining room table and it's got multiple bulbs in it. What if one bulb started talking to the other bulb? What would one bulb say to the other bulb? Well, I wondered that. And here's the answer. I love you a watt. Not a lot, a watt. That's how you measure electricity. I love you a watt. That's what they're talking about in the night when you're off to bed and you can't hear them talking. One light bulb is whispering to the other, I love you a watt. All right, segment number 4. Apply the why. Why are we even studying this chapter in the book of Romans? That's the big question on the table today, and we're fixing to answer it. One of the reasons that we are studying the book of Romans, chapter 11, verses 17 through 20, is because of verse 18, which I would like to draw your attention to. I also would like to draw your attention to 2 words up here in 17. This idea of grafted in, we've talked about that a lot, right? Okay, well, this idea of, he says, do not be arrogant toward the branches. So let's make a personal application to you and I in our own personal life. Have you ever been excited to be added to a group? I have. Have somebody invite you, and now you're part of the group too. When that happens, you need to always remember that you weren't there at the beginning. And just because you're added to the group, that doesn't make you the most special person in the group. And you shouldn't start acting as if, because I'm the most recently added, that makes me the most important. We need to be careful that when we're added to a group, that we not get guilty of being prideful. Have you ever known anyone who got prideful toward others just because they were added? Now, generally when that happens, I see people becoming prideful towards those who have not been added. That's a very, very big danger as well. It's not really what is being talked about here in Romans chapter 11, but it's a big application. When somebody else is not part of the group, you need to be careful not to become arrogant or prideful and make them feel bad because they're not part of the group. Instead, you ought to work towards helping to make sure they can get into the group. But if you are added to the group, it's important that you recognize that just because you're the last one that came in, that doesn't make you the most important person in the group. And that's one of the applications of Romans chapter 11. Okay. Here is your test preparation for segment number 4. Why is it wrong to be arrogant? Arrogant means prideful, thinking that you're the best. Why is it wrong to be that way? write a short paragraph as to why you believe that it is wrong for us to be arrogant. Which leads us, of course, to the next funny. What do you call a sad berry? A berry that's very sad. What do you call a sad berry? Well, I would call it a blueberry because it's blue. You get it? It's blue. I'm so blue, and I'm a berry. That makes me a berry, blueberry. That wasn't no. That probably will not make the charts. That wasn't a great, but segment 5. Time to test. This is the time that each of you and every one of you and all of us together put together in one big pot and stirred up. We love this moment, don't we? No, we don't, but we got to do it. It's test time. Now, here's the thing. You know this stuff. And because you know this stuff, you ought not be intimidated by this stuff. You got this stuff. This stuff is like stuffed into your stuffing right in there. So you got it. So don't fear. Just do it. Here are the questions. And remember, if your mom and dad will let you, it's an open book test. And so, I mean, come on. I've made it as easy as I can. Now I believe in you after all. We're into test number 11. There are the questions. So, moms, dads, and anybody else out there, I guess even Fido the dog, if you can, take a screenshot of that. And that way you'll have it so that you can test over the material in the 11th lesson of our series together. Oh dear. All right. Well, that was fun. At least I thought it was. I'm not sure about you because I don't know. I didn't hear you. You didn't speak loud enough for me to hear you from where you are. But I had a good deal of time of a funness. Anyhow, thank you for joining me. If you believe that it was worthwhile, your time was spent in a worthwhile manner, would you please consider praying for our ministry and perhaps donating so we can continue to keep stuff free and going out like, would you? Thank you. Thank you. This is Sonny Chow saying thank you so much for being with me. I mean it. Be there. Matthew 16:26. And with that, my friends, we go to the prayer time. Let's see, I got to get a drink. While you guys read that, let me get a drink over here, okay? All right, let's step through this. If you've got any prayer requests, now's the time to put them up there. People literally around the world. My buddy Dennis is all the way in Kenya, and he's a prayer guy. I know that he would pray for you, so put it up here. And we'll see if others can bring you before the throne of God. Home church mailings. By now, most of you in the United States, I'm sorry, Dennis, I can't afford to send it over there to you, but I will say this to you, Dennis. I'm fixing. That's a Northeast Arkansas word that means I'm about to. I'm fixing to start posting them online. In fact, I'll start doing that next week for August so that people will have a home church study guide, Bible study guide, that they can use in their own home churches every Sunday from now on is my goal. All right, so anyhow, even if you don't get it in the mail, you will be able to see it online. But I mailed these out. If you didn't get one by now, you're not on my mailing list, or the post office messed up. And what we need is for you to message me with your address if you want to be on that. It's all free and happy to send it to you. Spiritual warfare. I am about to launch into a lengthy period of time with several of my friends, and a good friend of mine is deeply, intensely badgered and attacked by Satan. And I'm very, very concerned for this individual. And me and some of my friends are about to enter into a time of deep prayer and fasting because of the spiritual warfare that's going on. There are so many like that in the world. In fact, you might be one who's struggling under that very, very thing right now. What I would encourage you to do is make it known to your brothers and sisters in Christ that you're struggling, so that others can be prayerful for you, with you, be prayer warriors on your behalf. That's why this time is very important for you to go ahead and just put it out there. And, folks around the world literally can be thinking about it, praying about it, etc. Okay, so spiritual warfare, would you be praying, especially over the next 7 days, as me and this group of people are going into some intense spiritual warfare battle, that we will be protected, but we will also be effective as we try to storm the gates of hell, literally, on behalf of a good friend. All right. And again, if you've got something that we can pray for you about, put it up there. Flash flood victims. Many of you know that I don't remember the statistic. I want to say it's 25 or more that died just this past week in eastern Kentucky. Flash floods came up and just washed some children literally right out of the arms of their parents. And very, very tragic situation. Would you be please prayerful about the flash floods? The thing that's interesting and odd about this is that we desperately needed water, rain here in Arkansas. But as the storms came through and the water fell and all of the that is aiding me and my family and the farmers that I love in my area, it was a real problem for many of those in eastern Kentucky. And so anyhow, that's the broken world that we live in. And I'll be preaching, by the way, at Marmaduke here in about an hour. And if you want to know more about a broken world and the last days and that kind of thing, tune in at about what is it? About 10:20 is when I go live there. But we live in a broken world, and oddly enough, blessings that come to Arkansas farmers are a curse, if you will, to many in Kentucky. So be thoughtful of the flash flood victims, would you? We've got another School of Biblical Studies semester that's about to begin at the end of this month, at the end of August. And would you be prayerful? We're going to make a few little tweaks to it. I think we've got some really good material that's coming on. And if you be praying for the School of Biblical Studies, we have, again, literally people around the world who are using these lessons, and we want to make them as accessible as possible. Your support of this ministry helps us keep it all free, pays the utility bills, internet bills, what I meant to say with, I guess, utilities too, in the sense that, the electricity and all that, but mainly internet bills and all the programming things, computers that I've got to do in order to get it out there, et cetera, et cetera. You help me get through that, and I love you for it. And there's many people who are benefiting because of the fact that you are standing beside me as we do this. So please consider supporting us in your prayers and financially, if you can, with regards to the new semester that's about to start. The threats from China, I think that they're very, very real. And I think that we're seeing our world continue to literally implode on itself. I said recently in my series at Marmaduke that I advertised a moment ago, that I find it one of the things interesting in history. I've got a minor in history, and so that's one of my kind of little areas that I love to kind of look back over things. And one of the things that's been interesting in history is that up until the present time, most every judgment of God has come on a specific group of people, a nation. One exception, all the way back at Noah. But we are entering into very much a Noah-like time again. At the time of Noah, God engaged the entire planet, did he not? Well, we're finding that God is doing that more and more today. It seems like the entire planet is being uprooted, being involved in all the uproar that's going, the pandemic, etc. I think that when God moves his attention to the world, it's going to be in that moment, one of those moments that we're going to see the return of Christ. I think it's very likely you're living in the day that Jesus will return. Problems in Russia and Ukraine just kind of doubles up on that China thing. And then lastly, here's my sweet wife and my son. Notice all the laundry hangers. Forgive the underwear. But I still haven't got her dryer fixed. Would you be praying? Because tomorrow's the day. I'm going to have to crawl into the house. I'm going to have to do some rewiring to see if I can get this thing. And I'm not an electrician. And I don't like getting into the house, but here we go. So tomorrow's the day. Would you be praying for old Sonny Childs that he'll have brains? Not get himself electrocuted, number one. And then number two, that all the snakes and such, because we got snake skins under there, that they could kind of move aside as I get under there and try to do that work. Could you be praying for me? Thank you. Lord's Day Live, and you're with me. That means the world. Thank you so very, very much. We're dealing with Romans Applied, and we're into chapter 11. Romans chapter 11. And we're trying to take each one of these chapters and show how part of that chapter clearly exposes Calvinism. And you're going to see that easily in this chapter as well. Although the theme of the chapter doesn't seem to fit in with this idea of exposing Calvinism, but stay with me. I think you can see how we're going to put this together. Here are 5 questions for you to study. You can do it on your own. Listen to this particular lesson and fill in the blanks as you go along, whatever you want. Part of the School of Biblical Studies. Here are your 5 questions. All right. Here we go. You got a screenshot of that? I'm moving on. All right, here's your text, okay? And I'll go up and spend some time on this, the remainder of the lesson, but I wanted you to see where we get our theme. Notice the tree, okay? You got a tree, and there's a branch that has been, you see the kind of the wrapping there? This branch has been grafted into that tree. Gentiles are grafted in. You get that from 17 and following. But if some of the branches were broken off, and you, although a wild olive shoot, were grafted in among the others, and now share in the nourishing root of the olive tree, do not be arrogant toward the branches. If you are, remember, it is not you who support the root, but the root that supports you. This is the Jew, and the Jew is the root. This is where we're going to get our Messiah. This is where we get the old law. There's all the history of the Old Testament, that right through here, okay? And we as the Gentiles are grafted in. We do not replace, but I would say, in a sense, we complete. Because God's going to break off the branches that are not faithful. And the big point that we're going to make today in our lesson is that all of Israel was elected. When you're born a Jew, you were born elected. But not all of Israel was saved. And so election and salvation are not always the same thing. Hold on to that thought. But we as Gentiles are going to be grafted in. When we're grafted in, we should not get arrogant, because we need to remember that we're actually being supported by the root. It's the history of the Jew and the law and all the prophets, all of that stuff comes at us because of the Jew. And so we as Gentiles need to appreciate being grafted into and not be arrogant over top of, which I find a lot of my brethren doing, especially with the whole replacement theology. We've got to really be careful with that. All right, now I want to move to this section, okay? All right, let's draw our first application. Oh, that's application number 2. I don't know why my stuff is doing this, but it's bouncing around. I think I'm going to have to get a new computer system. All right, as we move through, I ask then, has God rejected his people? Verse 1 of chapter 11. Has God rejected his people? Now, Paul's going to say, by no means. But what I want you to see is that he actually answers this question down later in the text. One of the big applications, I think, to Scripture is just let the Bible interpret the Bible. Keep reading. So, has God rejected his people? Skip on down to verse 17. But some of the branches were broken off. Yes, God has rejected some of his people. But he didn't reject all of his people, and that's the point that's being made up here. Application number 1. No, God did not reject all of the Jews. I would say that he has rejected most of the Jews. Most Jews are not faithful. I'm told that many Jews today, as a matter of fact, are atheists. Can you imagine? But it's typical of humanity, and certainly typical of the Jew and the cycle that they go through. But what he is asking here is, has God rejected all of his people? No. And we'll see that in the next application. No. But he has rejected some of them. Big application that we're going to make with regards to this in the next frame. So, I ask you, has God rejected his people? No, by no means. And then he's going to give an illustration. He's going to say, for I myself am an Israelite. God hasn't rejected me, Paul is going to say. And so because God has not rejected me, that obviously makes it clear that he has not rejected all of his people. Has he rejected some of his people? Yeah, we already saw this last frame. But now I need to make application number 2, okay? I need you to understand that according to Isaiah 65 and 9 and other places, all of Israel was elected. I am absolutely confident that the word election means favor more than it means saved. In other words, God favored them, gave them certain advantages. We see election happening all the time with regards to God. Why did you get born in America and somebody else get born in a third world country? Because you are elected. You have a favor. God put you in a particular situation that gives you advantages in some ways over another person. Israel was given those advantages. All of Israel. When a baby was born, certainly you could argue when a little baby boy was circumcised, they became, on the 8th day, they became elected. Part of this wonderful, privileged group of people called the Jew. But the fact of the matter is that most Jews did not honor their election. And because they didn't honor their election, even though elected, they weren't saved. Application number 2, God did not reject all of his people, because Paul says, I'm an Israelite. But all of God's people as Jews were elected, although some of them will reject their election. Application: all of Israel was elected, but not all of Israel was saved. This is a very, very important point to make with regards to the Calvinists. Because Calvinists believe that election and salvation are absolutely the same thing. So when they go to Romans chapter 9, for instance, and they begin talking about election, they begin drawing conclusions about eternal salvation right off the bat. When in fact it might be that he's not talking about eternal salvation as much as he's just talking about being favored. For instance, Israel I loved, Jacob I loved, Esau I hated. They'll say, see there? And by the way, it says in the passage that this happened before they ever did good or evil. And so they will say in Romans chapter 9, that shows that you are elected before you ever do anything good or evil. And that means that it was decided before you ever do anything good or evil whether or not you're going to heaven. See what they did there? They mixed election and salvation. Yes, before anything happened in my life, God had already decided whether I would be favored. Acts 17:27, he said, Sonny's going to be favored to the extent that I'm going to let him be born in America to godly parents. So yeah, I'm elected. But God did not say that my intentions, my actions, my choices have nothing to do with my salvation. All of Israel was elected, but not all of Israel was saved. So what does that tell you? Election does not necessarily mean salvation. Stay with me on that thought, and I'll expand on that. Application number 3. I got 4 of them for you today. God has not rejected his people, whom he foreknew. Very, very important idea. Whom he foreknew. What does that mean? Well, let God explain it. Do you not know that what the scriptures say? Elijah, how he appeals to God against Israel. So what God's going to do is he's going to say, I foreknew these people that I elected. All right, how did God foreknow them? Well, let me give you an illustration. Remember Elijah? He gets all blue and he said, nobody loves me and nobody loves you, Lord. And so he's all downhearted. And God says, or he says, Lord, they have killed the prophets, they have demolished the altars, I alone am left, and they seek my life. God said, nah. But what is God's reply to him? God says, nah, you don't know what you're talking about, because I foreknew. I have kept for myself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to Baal. So too are at the present time there is a remnant. God foreknew who would be in the remnant. God foreknew that there would be 7,000 men who would not bow their knee to Baal. So, big application. When you allow the Bible to interpret the Bible and you add Romans chapter 8:29 to Romans chapter 11, for those whom he foreknew, he also predestined, you begin to understand how God predestines or predetermines something. Calvinists would have you say that God just sat out there in the midst of no time and said, I like Sonny and I don't like Susie. So Sonny gets to go to heaven and Susie gets to go to hell. When in fact what God did is, because he's outside the time bubble, he created our world knowing full well what choices I would make of my own, by the way, independent free will. He knew what I was going to do. He knew all the choices that Susie was going to make according to her independent free will. And knowing those ahead of time, if you will, because he's outside of time, he was able to predetermine whether Susie would go to heaven or hell or Sonny would go to heaven or hell. Based upon our choices, not based upon God sitting out there somewhere just saying, I like Sonny and I hate Susie. Very, very important application. Remember, we're dealing with election, not necessarily salvation. Okay? And so, even though God will know the choices Sonny or Susie make with regards to salvation, and then bases his predestination on my choices, when it comes to election, that's not necessarily the case. God doesn't have to pre-know anything. God can just say, I'm going to give Sonny certain privileges and advantages, and Susie's not going to get as many privileges or advantages. That's exactly what he did with Jacob and Esau. But that doesn't mean that he's going to pre-assign one of us to a heaven and one of us to hell based upon just, I don't like you, and not taking into consideration the choices that we make. Application. God predestines according to what he foreknows about the choices we will make. Clearly, that's the illustration happening here. He said he foreknew. Then he illustrates it by talking about the 7,000 men who've never bowed their knee and the remnant that he has preserved. Number 4. The final application I have for you comes from verse 7. What then? Israel failed to obtain what it was seeking. The elected obtained it, but the rest were hardened. Calvinists will go here and they'll say, see there, only the elect will obtain it. I agree. But that doesn't mean there weren't others who were part of the elect who refused it and thus didn't obtain it. Just as he did with Pharaoh, God gives us all opportunity to confirm our calling. Only those who do so remain elected. Remember what he did with Pharaoh? Go back and read the story. God does not immediately harden the heart of Pharaoh, does he? He allows Pharaoh to harden his own heart repeatedly. And once God has seen that Pharaoh has been given the opportunity and has rejected his election. Was Pharaoh elected? Absolutely. Think about all the blessings and the privileges the Pharaoh had. Not the least of which is to be a Pharaoh who comes to the throne at the time that God's people are in Egypt. Yeah, Pharaoh was elected, but he rejected his election. Notice what Peter is going to say about that process. Therefore, brothers, be the more diligent to what? Confirm your calling and election, for if you practice these qualities, you will never fall. So, we are called to confirm, and how do we do that? By the practices of the qualities that he is talking about in that passage. We are called to take action on behalf of our election. So, Pharaoh was called to take action. He was given advantages. He's Pharaoh, leader of the known world at the time. He's got God's people working for him. Yeah, he's got major advantages. And so God says, okay, will you confirm your election, the advantages that you have? And Pharaoh says, no, I won't. And so God has to repeatedly say, let my people go, until eventually Pharaoh has hardened his heart enough that God recognizes he's not changing. I mean, think about it. He didn't even change once his son died. He's still hard-hearted. And so God says, okay, enough's enough of you. And so I reject you from my elected. You're no longer advantaged. And we saw the devastation that was poured out upon Egypt because of that. Now, how does that affect you and I? Come to our verse. The elect obtained it because those who obtain it are the ones who remain elected. How do you remain elected? By confirming through the qualities that you practice. If you remain elected, at the end of the day, you're going to be called the elect. You're going to be called the remnant at the end of the day. But if you don't confirm it, then your election is removed and you are no longer part of the elect. And so he can say the elect obtained it, only the elect obtained it, because those who didn't obtain it, they refused their election. That makes sense? Why does it do that? Come back. All right, so from this lesson, we have seen a lot of things, but here are 5 questions that I presented earlier, but perhaps you've been able to go through and fill them in. Maybe not. If not, read them on your own or research them on your own. But the big question that I have for you with regards to these 5 is this. What are you doing to confirm your own election? Can I take you back just real quickly? Maybe. Peter is going to speak to the church, to Christians, and he's going to say, brothers. He's not talking about the pagans of the world. He's talking about the church. He's going to say, brothers, you have to be more diligent. This crazy, cockamamie denial of free will that Calvin puts forward is a damnable doctrine that we have got to resist and push out of our context. We do have responsibility. We do have a free will. And we are required to take responsibility for our free will. Why else would he say be more diligent? Why tell me to be more diligent if I don't have any free will? Tell God to be more diligent on my behalf. He tells the church to be more diligent, specifically for the purpose of confirming. How do I confirm my election? By practicing. I am responsible for practicing specifically the qualities that Peter mentions in this passage. Please, please, I beg of you, throw off the false doctrines of Calvinism. Once saved, always saved? one of the most popular doctrines of the Baptist world, has to do with this very concept. Think about it. If you're once saved, always saved, that means that once you're saved, you're a puppet. Now, I don't mean to be harsh, but that's what it means. If at the end of the day there is no way for you to walk away from the choices that you have made, then that means that at the end of the day, you are nothing more than a pre-programmed puppet. I am convinced that throughout eternity, you will have free will. I'm also convinced that once you come into the presence of God, and especially given the history that we will have had on the planet, that none of us are going to want to ever go back on our word. That's why I think he can say there will be no sin in heaven. We're never going to want to miss the mark. We're never going to, but I don't think that that means that we are going to be pre-programmed robots sitting on clouds, strumming hymns, brainlessly letting expressions of glory go to God that we don't even feel or mean because we're nothing more than puppets. I don't think that's what's going to happen. And that's what Calvinism teaches. So, back to my conclusion once more. What are you doing to confirm your election? Massive question that you need to work on daily. Thank you for being such a supportive person with regards to my ministry. Please pray for us. And if possible, in your missions given this crazy Biden economy, if you could remember us in your missions giving, that would mean the world to Sonny and Cindy. It's Lord's Day, and here, and I don't know, we've been having our home services about 1 o'clock, and because of all the stuff I got to do on Sunday mornings. And so when we come together, it's going to look a lot like that. And little curly-head Judah is going to pass out the communion, and we're going to stop and we're going to think. We go around the room. I think I told you this, and everybody in the room is supposed to say how they saw God this week. Very inspirational. We try to keep it simple, innocent, and meaningful. We try not to stare at the back of the head of the fellow in front of us. We try not to use prepackaged kits for our communion service. We try not to let just one person in the room lead. We try to make this a family affair. I would ask you to do the same thing. Even if you're bent on going to one of those sacred cathedrals and going through the religious motions, may I ask of you when you get home to do it as the first century church did it. Come together intimately and share in something that should be simple, innocent, and very, very meaningful. Make sure that Jesus has your heart. Thank you for joining me this morning. Sonny Chow saying, be there. Matthew 16:26.